All right, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Well, I hope you've had a nice lunch and lots of water to drink with it. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So let me tell you just a little bit about myself first, because I'm sure you haven't read the bios that are in your packages. So my name is David Nahai. I do two things right now. I own a consulting company, David Nahai Consulting Services, and I'm a partner at a law firm as well. And at the law firm, I co-chair the firm's energy, water, environmental, and real estate practice areas. And this is what I do in my consulting service as well. I come very proudly from the environmental community. I serve on the boards of a number of environmental organizations. And until a few years ago, I had the privilege of heading up the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. I had a 4-year involvement there, 2 years as its general manager, 2 years on the commission and as the commission president. And I also spent 10 years on the Regional Water Board. Was again honored to chair the Regional Water Board 4 times. I served in the administrations of 3 California governors. I've also served as senior advisor to the Clinton Climate Initiative in connection with some climate change issues. And I wanted to talk to you today about water generally, and in particular about the relationship of Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles, to water supply. And let me take a moment also to thank the organizers for inviting me here, to thank Reza, to thank Fran. And I was speaking with Reza earlier, and I said that I want to tell this story about the relationship between Los Angeles and water supply, because it's a story of how sometimes history is simply amoral. There is no morality to history. Things happen, and there are consequences upon consequences. And there are certain things that we can look at in history: the Holocaust, slavery, the Armenian genocide, stories of persecution and tyranny, the slaughter that is going on in Syria right now, and those are very easy to condemn. And we don't need to have a very strong moral compass to know that those things are simply wrong, no matter what the consequences are over time. But there are other stories where the morality of it is not quite clear, because things happen as a result of certain actions. History moves on like a river that takes its flow wherever it can. And we're left later on to judge whether what happened was right or wrong. And that is the story of water supply and the city of Los Angeles that we'll come to in a second. But let's talk about water.
How's our room? Audio.
I mean, we know human beings can survive all of 3 days without water. That's it, 3 days. No one would dispute the fact that water is essential to life. We also know that 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water. As a matter of fact, our planet should never have been called Earth. It should have been called ocean, because that's mostly what it is. But even though 70% of the Earth's surface is covered with water, less than 1% can be used for human consumption. That's because it's salt water on the ocean, and much of the water is locked up in ice caps or too inaccessible, and so it's less than 1%. And there is no new water on the Earth. It's all the same water. The water that you drank today passed through the kidneys of the Neanderthals. It may have been enjoyed by the dinosaurs, because nature takes that same water on our planet Earth and recycles it. And we drink the same water over and over again. So if we have the same amount of water, and if it's not expanding, and if it's not reducing, why do we keep hearing about a water shortage? It isn't that there is any less water. It's that the reason why there is a water shortage, and there is, are due basically to 3 factors. 1, population growth. We keep reproducing, and we're dying later and later in life. So by the year 2050, we will have 9 billion people on the surface of the Earth. That's another 3 billion from where we stand today. Second reason why we're running short on water is contamination. We have not yet learned that we'd better take care of this planet that we live on, including our water supplies. Even in Los Angeles, here in the United States of America, we do have a groundwater basin. It's called the San Fernando Valley Aquifer. And it was polluted during the Second World War, and it continues to be contaminated today. And we're going to have to do something about that if we're going to have a sustainable water supply in the city of Los Angeles. The third reason is climate change and the uncertainties that climate change brings with it. Protracted droughts, changes in precipitation, changes in the pattern of snowmelt, which is how we get our water, mostly certainly in LA and here in the Southland. So these are the reasons why we have a water shortage. But you know something? We're lucky here. Nobody expects that they're going to turn the tap and that water isn't going to come out of it. Water that's been tested, water that's been purified, water that's gone through. At LADWP, we tested the water 300,000 times a year for different contaminants. But that's the number of times that we tested it. We're lucky. I'm going to be talking to some school kids on Monday morning. Young school kids, 5, 6, 7 years old. I'm going to tell them, and I hope that they'll understand, that around the world, 1.5 million kids below the age of 5 die of waterborne diseases. 1.5 million. That's about 3 every second. There are countries where mothers won't even name their kids until they're 5 years old because they have no guarantee that those kids will survive. We are lucky. Almost 1 billion people don't have access to clean water. 2.5 billion don't have sanitation. Over 1 billion defecate in open space because they have no toilets. So we're in the world, we're on this collision course between climate change, population growth, and ever-escalating demands on water. And we need to deal with that on a global basis. But that doesn't mean, just because we're lucky right now, that we're completely immune from all of the impacts of climate change and population growth and so on. And so with that, I'm going to start. Which one do I press?
One to the right. Right arrow.
Okay, there we go. Miraculous. So with that, I'm going to talk about the challenges that I think we face in Los Angeles, which are nothing compared to what the rest of the world faces. But nevertheless, I think there are some lessons to be learned here, and there are some lessons to be learned in the amorality of history. Okay, so here's where our water comes from in Los Angeles. From the Sacramento Delta, over there, from the Colorado River, and from the LA Aqueduct. It's the story of the LA Aqueduct that I'm going to tell you. But all of those water resources are under tremendous pressure. Shipments have been cut from the Delta because there's an ecosystem there that is so fragile right now that it's practically on the brink of collapse. Supplies from the Colorado River have been capped because there are other societies that are vying for that water. And as you will see, what comes down to us from the Los Angeles Aqueduct has also been severely reduced because of the environmental obligations that we have up in the Owens Valley area. Okay, so we're going to tell the story of the Los Angeles Aqueduct. Okay, this rather imposing gentleman is William Mulholland. People drive up and down Mulholland Drive in Los Angeles, this beautiful scenic road, and have no idea who Mulholland even was. This man is the single most important figure in the history of Los Angeles. Why? Because he brought water to LA. Without him, Los Angeles would not be the second largest city in the United States. It would not be the economic engine of the of the state of California, it would not be the most diverse city or one of the most diverse cities on the face of the planet, where I think we have an obligation to succeed, because we stand in LA as a beacon to the world that you can have a city in which 140 different languages are spoken in the schools, in which so many creeds and colors and religions and faiths come together, and yet you can have a city that succeeds. That's a lesson that we need to impart to the world. And we wouldn't be able to do it if we didn't have water. Now, this gentleman is a hero in some places and a villain in others. He, by the way, came to Los Angeles, a lowly Irish immigrant. He started as a ditch digger and ended up being the chief engineer of the city of Los Angeles at the age of 31. He achieved this miracle of building this aqueduct, 200 miles, and it operates solely on gravity, not a single pump, to bring that water down to LA, and it produces electricity along the way as well. This was this man's genius. Later on in life, he made a mistake. He designed a dam, the St. Francis Dam, some would say negligently, and the dam collapsed, and many people lost their lives as a result of that. He faced criminal negligence proceedings. He was exonerated, but his stature and his spirit were damaged as a result, and I think he died a very sad man. He was a man of few words, but what he said was always clever. It was suggested to him that he should be the mayor of Los Angeles, and his response was, "I would rather give birth to a porcupine backwards." Okay. The next figure we want to talk about is this gentleman in the middle. His name was Fred Eaton. And Fred Eaton was the mayor of Los Angeles. And Fred Eaton had traveled to a paradise, a place of lush landscapes, where there were majestic mountains that rimmed this valley to the north and the south, where there was plenty of snow and plenty of rain and flowing rivers and beautiful green valleys and a 100-square-mile lake. Here's a picture of it. Now, that may not look like much to you because it's in black and white, but it was a beautiful thing in its day. And it was 100 square miles. That's about a quarter the size of the entire city of Los Angeles. That's how big it was. Here's another picture of it. And Mulholland and Eaton figured out that if they could build an aqueduct and get that water from the lower Owens River down to Los Angeles, they would be able to see the city of Los Angeles blossom. And so they went and they bought up as much land as they could in the Owens Valley, surrounding, actually to the north of the lake. I think right now that my former agency, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, owns more land in the Owens Valley that underlies the entire city of Los Angeles. That's over 460 square miles. Why did they buy that land? They bought it for the water rights. But they didn't just go up there and tell folks, we're the LA Department of Water and we want to buy your land. They said they were farmers, and they were speculators, and they were ranchers, and they had academic interests, or whatever it was. So the full story was not told to the residents of the Owens Valley. And here is where the moral issue starts to show itself. This work, by the way, was back-breaking work. It was done, with mules and whiskey, to build this thing 200 miles. Let me tell you another story. When I was at LADWP, I was instrumental in erecting a memorial to all of the workers of LADWP who died on the job, right? Because especially the electrical workers can get electrocuted, suffer horrendous burns, and many of them have died as first responders serving the people of Los Angeles. But we were missing something like 80 names. We couldn't find them, couldn't find their names. And those were just some of the people that died constructing the aqueduct. These are the kinds of conditions that they worked under. Here's another picture. Nothing modern for them to work with. But over time, you can see the aqueduct here with the lake in the background. Over time, they built it. And it was completed 100 years ago, in 1913. And Mulholland had another famous speech when the water actually flowed into LA. He was asked to make a speech, and all he said was, "There it is, take it." It's a very famous speech of his. So the aqueduct was built, and the locals, though, felt utterly betrayed. They actually attacked the aqueduct. They bombed it, and agents had to be sent up there in order to stop this uprising. But it was built, and water came to Los Angeles. And so far one would say, well, okay, that's a bit of a problem. They shouldn't have, deceived anybody. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Maybe the people really knew and pretended not to know. There are all kinds of things that we can talk about there. But what happened was that 100-square-mile lake, within a period of 13 years, because all of the water that was going to it was getting diverted now to the city of Los Angeles, within 13 years, it dried up. And this is what it became. What you're seeing here is a completely dry lake bed, and this is a dust storm. Toxic, saline, fine particles of dust blowing off that lake every single time there was a wind gust. I went up there one time as a commissioner, and in the middle of one of the meetings, a woman came up to me and she said, "You know what, Mr. Nahai? I have to lock my daughter up every single time the wind blows." Taught me something. Here's another picture. It looks like a wave, doesn't it? But this is another dust storm. And for a long time, I think the city didn't really realize its full responsibility here. There were some theories that the lake may have, kind of dried up anyway over time, as other lakes do. I don't know. Again, with history, you don't know what would have happened. You know what did happen. And what did happen was an environmental calamity. And so, after a while, after court proceedings and complaints and so on, and a number of decades, the city of Los Angeles accepted its responsibility and started to remediate the dust. I mean, this kind of shows you what happened to that lake. What you're seeing here is gravel spread out on what used to be a 100-square-mile lake in order to suppress the dust. Another method is called shallow flooding. Now, shallow flooding was all well and good, and has been all well and good, in a period where there's no drought, where there's plenty of water coming from the Colorado River, plenty of water coming from the Sacramento Delta. You can afford to put water on the lake because it's cheap. But when shipments from the Sacramento Delta are constrained, when supplies from the Colorado River are capped, then all of a sudden, that is a precious resource. And so, the city, in conjunction with local communities, has been trying to find now waterless solutions. And of course, that search has led to another series of lawsuits, which are still going on. There are settlement conversations that are going on right now between LADWP and the communities of the Owens Valley in order to try to deal with this somehow. But what it tells us in the end is that we cannot rely any longer on shipments from the Owens Valley. One reason, there's a very erratic snowpack. Where does that water come from? it comes from the eastern Sierra Mountains. So if we've got an erratic snowpack over there, if we've got the delta in trouble over there, if we've got limitations on the Colorado River, and we've got 90% of our water coming from the outside, and the other 10% is coming from our own groundwater basin, which is contaminated, what are we to do? Okay. This tells you where we are right now. I hope everybody knows what an acre-foot of water is. An acre-foot of water is water parlance. Imagine a football field, and imagine a foot of water on it. That's an acre-foot. It's 325,000 gallons is what it is. Okay, so right now, pretty much, we get about 35% from the Owens Valley, about 52% from both the Colorado River and the Sacramento Delta. Our recycled water is negligible. On our local water, this is what comes from groundwater, from that contaminated aquifer. That's all we can get out of it right now. And that has to change. And this is, over here, you'll see the projections of the city for the future. So that what we get from the Colorado River and the Sacramento Delta will be slashed by half, right? We're trying to increase what we get from the LA aqueduct by moving to waterless solutions and more efficient ways of bringing that water down. We want to clean up the aquifer so that we get, instead of 11%, 16%. We want to expand recycled water, much more conservation, capture some of our rainfall, do water transfers, and so on. Now, this is saying a 2035 timeframe. I think the city would like to move that to a 2025. Move it up. All right. This is a graph that I would look at practically every day when I was at LADWP. This is of the Mammoth Pass snowpack. This is what tells us how much snow we're going to get, and therefore how much water we're going to get coming down the aqueduct and also the Sacramento Delta. Now, you can see that dotted line at the top. That was a wettest year back in 1982. You can see the driest year is this down here. That was the 1976-77 drought. The red line is where we are right now. And you can see, and the long-term mean is this black dotted line. So we're well under the long-term mean. That means that next year, we're not going to have that much snow. This is why the governor came out and declared a drought. All right, this talks about what we've done in the city of Los Angeles as far as conservation is concerned. We've done a great job. Nobody knows about it, but we have. Our population has grown by 1 million people, and our water consumption has actually declined. That's due to low-flow shower heads and efficient toilets and many other conservation programs. And you can see here that LA is doing a lot better than many other big cities in the US. Now, that's 123 gallons per capita. And compared to the rest of the US, we can brag, right? Compared to the rest of the world, we should hang our heads. Because people do much better in Europe, they do much better in Australia, they do much better in Israel, and they're no less healthy than we are. All right, so this is going to be, I think, the way of the future, not just for LA, but for many Southern California cities. Much more conservation, repairing our infrastructure so that we don't have leaking pipes, so that we don't lose water all the time. New building standards so that water conservation, energy conservation become an integral part of building design. Wastewater recycling, the adage goes, it's not waste unless it's wasted. And our wastewater is an asset. And we have the technology, the science, the ability to recycle it and reuse it, both for non-potable purposes and for potable purposes. And we have to do that. Rainfall capture. Take a look outside around you. All of this pavement, rooftops, freeways, all of that causes rainfall to just run off to the ocean. In LA, we waste about 60% of our rain. Think about it. In this place, talk about a paradox. In this place where we have to import 90% of our water, we treat our rainfall like it's some kind of nuisance to be gotten rid of as quickly as possible. So that has to change. We've talked about groundwater and how important it is to clean up our groundwater. Underground storage, I think, is clear enough. With climate change, we're going to have years in which we'll have very wet years, followed by very dry years. And we need to be able to store the water in the wet years for use in the drier years. And underground is the best way to do it. You don't have evaporation. You don't have aerial contamination. So underground storage is the way to go. And finally, agriculture. We don't have much agriculture in the city of Los Angeles, obviously. But in the state of California, about 80% of the water is used by agriculture, only 20% by urban. And yet I think urban has an obligation to move forward, to show that urban users can deal with water responsibly. And I think hopefully our agricultural sisters and brothers will also follow suit. Okay, I'm done there, and I don't know if we have time for questions. I'm happy to take them if there are any. Do we have time?
Okay. No, but go ahead.
What's the nature of the contamination in the aqueduct, please, and how is it going to be remedied?
Of the groundwater basin, you mean? Yeah. It's VOC contamination, volatile organic compounds from the aerospace industry during the war mostly. And the way, it's a Superfund site, so far it's been the obligation of the federal government to do the cleanup. It has not gone well. And so what has to be done is that various parts of it have to be chosen, and there has to be wellhead treatment in which the water is sucked up, cleaned, and re-injected. It's going to be an enormous project, but I think the city has to do it because the federal government has really not been able to. Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead. Sure.
Excellent presentation. You told us that 8% is agriculture, 20% urban. Do you happen to know what the split is on urban, like industrial, commercial versus residential?
I think it varies. I think in LA, it's mostly residential.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And in LA, it's mostly residential, and the next place to really attack is outdoor use.
Yeah.
Sprinklers, lawns. I'm sorry, you had a question? One more?
Two more, actually.
If it seriously doesn't rain in the next few years, how long can we pull on?
Well, for us in Southern California, the Metropolitan Water District had the foresight to build reservoirs, and so we have that storage. At some point, if we, I'm not saying this will happen, but the Australians hit a 10-year drought, and we're very, ill prepared for that kind of thing. And they got to a place where they finally said, you know what, we've got to build desalination plants. And so they started to build desalination plants, and they were in the middle of building one when the drought broke, and then they had flooding. So this is why, we have to take these steps, in my opinion, now, because we don't know what climate change is going to do to us.
Couple more back there. Go ahead. This is your conference.
Yeah. Well, the omission of seawater desalination from my list is very much on purpose. Let me say, I don't completely close the door on desal technology, right? Why? Because we need it for aquifer remediation and we need it for wastewater recycling. But for us, here in Southern California, there is so much more to do before we turn to the ocean. Now, other places in the world, they've had to do that. Israel is an example. But Israel, processes 80% of its wastewater. It reclaims and treats and reuses 80% of its wastewater. Once you're done recycling 80% of your wastewater, where else are you going to turn? So there are places in the world where I think there is no option but to turn, in their case, to the Mediterranean. But for us, you know, when our per capita use is 123 gallons a day, when our wastewater recycling is 1 or 2%, when 60% of our rainfall is wasted, when our aquifer is contaminated, I mean, those are the things that we need to do first. Because seawater desal right now is by far the most expensive treatment of water. It produces a brine that one has to deal with. You've got to build facilities with very large footprints along the coast. There is marine life impacts that happen. And it's the most energy intensive of all of the treatment processes. So, by the way, even as we move forward and think how we're going to get our water, we've also got to think of the amount of energy that is used in producing that water. Right now, 20% of all of the energy use in the state of California comes from moving, treating, dealing with water. 20%. And the cost of energy and the availability of energy is going up as well. So that's a consideration we need to have. But ultimately, you know, we've built treatment plants like, you know, Hyperion and others that cost billions of dollars in order to treat our wastewater to a high degree and then discharge it into the ocean. To me, right now, it makes no sense to treat that wastewater to a high degree, dump it in the ocean, and then suck it back out to take the salt out of it. Right? So we need to try to do that before that wastewater hits the ocean, and this is why wastewater recycling is such an important item in my menu. Now, that doesn't mean that at some point in the future we won't have to turn to the ocean, but today is not that day. We've got a lot more to do first.